Okay, Tim, I'm ready on my end and I'll email you the sign-in list. And it looks like David's ready, so we're ready to go.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Tim Voss, and I'm the chair of the Historic Conservation Board. I'd like to take a minute to remind everyone about the rules of this proceeding. This proceeding is at all times governed by the rules of procedure adopted by the board on September 26, 2011, amended March 23rd, 2015, last amended March 9th, 2020. A copy of the rules of procedure is available for review online. All those planning to testify today, which does not include those solely making arguments such as attorneys, will be asked to take an oath administered by the board's attorney when they testify. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. As such, the board reserves the right to deliberate in private. The Ohio rules of evidence do not apply to this hearing. However, professional rules of conduct do apply, and candor of the tribunal is required. The board members are citizen volunteers that are not paid for their service. They are treated as public officials under Ohio law. Any attempt to influence them, including but not limited to bribery, intimidation, retaliation, which may include contacting their employer in an attempt to exert influence, is punishable as a crime. All should be aware that this meeting is being tape recorded, therefore please speak clearly into the microphone and state your name and address for the record. In the event of any technical difficulties with the video conferencing technology, I may continue or postpone this hearing at my discretion. All participants providing testimony must have both camera and audio features turned on in order to participate. With that said, we'll proceed to the first item. 112 West 15th Street is a consent item. So I will hear from any board member who would like to take it off the consent docket. Absent that, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the zoning relief as laid out by staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Zelasco.
Aye.
Ms. Smith-Dobbins.
Yes.
Mr. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman.
Aye.
And I understand Ms. McKenzie's not with us. Is that correct? The chair votes aye. Item number 1 is approved. Item number 2, 1608 Elm Street. Ms. Johnson.
1608 Elm Street is within the Overbearing Historic District. The request before us is for a certificate of appropriateness for a change in the roof pitch at the rear, which is a roof addition and related zoning relief for increase of density. There's also other work in relation to some addition of windows and a rear deck as well. The zoning relief is to allow for a 5 residential unit building. The base zoning allows for 4 residential units. A variance to allow 5 units at 400 square feet of lot area per unit is required. The property is an existing building, an existing 4-story building, and configuring the building into 5 apartments does require zoning relief. The addition on the 4th floor to allow for a change in roof pitch is making the ability to use that, use more space on the top floor for an additional unit. The applicant is seeking a density that is similar to other densities that have been approved for existing buildings within the area. The board since 2016 has approved range in densities anywhere from as low as 150 up to 864 square feet of lot area per unit. The majority of the variances allow for a density within the CCP of about 200 to 300 square feet of lot area per unit. They are requesting 400 square feet of lot area per unit. Staff does feel that this is a justifiable variance and that they are asking for a variance that is similar to other rights that people within the district and the neighborhood enjoy. In regards to the rooftop addition, so they are doing a rooftop addition that will be slightly visible from the street due to the 3-story building next door to it. However, while they are changing the roof pitch, the overall roof, the overall shape of the roof will pretty much remain the same, as it will be currently is a shed roof from front to back, and what they are requesting for will maintain that shape approximately maintain that shape as well. And so will still have a slight shed roof from front to back, but by just adding that additional 4 feet 4 inches at the highest will allow for additional living space within that area. They will be using brick to try and match as closely as possible. And this addition is small, and so it does allow additional height. And while this does change the pitch, the overall shape is remaining the same, and the overall massing and architectural integrity of the building will not be changed. The proposal is also adding a few new windows on the rear at that top floor to allow for additional light into that. The windows are approximately the same size as the existing openings on the building and are placed in alignment with the other windows in both the row and column pattern to match the architectural language of the building. The new openings are on the side of the building and do not impact architectural integrity. Other improvements include a rear wood deck, and this is not highly visible from the principal facade and would have been able to be approved at a staff level. Also, additional work includes a storefront, which also would have been able to be approved at a staff level. They are reintroducing a historically appropriate storefront that had previously been bricked in. Staff recommends the following: to approve a numerical variance to allow for a 5 residential unit building at 400 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit in excess of the permitted 4 units per plans for 1608 Elm Street, submitted by Denny Dellinger, architects, dated 7/30/2021. And approve a certificate of appropriateness for a proposed roof addition, change of pitch, new storefront, new windows and window openings, rear deck, and other rehabilitation work for plans for 1608 Elm Street, submitted by Denny Dellinger, architects, dated 7/30/2021, with the condition that the building permit must be issued within 2 years or the COA shall expire.
Thank you. Denny Dellinger, you're speaking on behalf of the applicant. Do you have anything you'd like to add that staff has not told us?
The existing number of units on the site is
I
8.
need to get you sworn in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could
right.
you raise your right hand, sir? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, so start over for us. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Denny Dellinger, architect for 1608 Elm Street, and I'd just like to point out that there are existing 8 units on the site now, and we're reducing the number of units by converting the existing first floor front residential unit back to a commercial unit, and we're combining vertically 2 very small units at the rear of the stairway with a spiral stair to reduce the overall number of units on the site. And that's really all I have to add.
All right. Does the board have any questions for staff or the applicant? Absent that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we approve the zoning relief as stipulated by staff, as well as the certificate of occupancy,
Appropriateness.
also per staff's recommendations.
You did mean certificate of appropriateness.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Mr. Zelasco,
Aye.
Ms. Dobbins,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
the chair votes aye. Item number 2, 1608 Elm Street is approved. That brings us to item number 3, 1812 Keys Crescent. Ms. Johnson?
1812 Keys Crescent is in the East Walnut Hills Historic District. The request before us is for a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new 2-car garage and carport and associated zoning relief. The details of the zoning relief are, in regards to the accessory structure, are that accessory structures are not permitted in front yard or side yards except for fences and walls, flagpoles, lamp posts, arbors, trellises, bird baths, etc. The proposed structure is in the front yard and a locational variance is required. The maximum size of accessory structures are 800 square feet. The proposed structure is 870 square feet, so 70 square foot dimensional variance is required. The maximum height for accessory structures is 15 feet, and so the proposed height is 18 feet. A 3-foot dimensional variance is required, and then a special exception for front yard parking is required. So here is the property, and I'm going to first, before we get too much into any analysis, explain the zoning and what is considered front yard and side yard, because this is a fairly complicated site, in that what I think most of us would consider the front, which would be the architectural front, is actually the zoning side yard. So this is a double frontage lot because it has 3 street frontages. So Keys Crescent is here at the bottom. This is Madison Road, and then Keys Crescent kind of curves around. And so per the zoning code, the front yard is actually what is the shorter of the length. So if you have a 50 by 100, the side that is 50 feet is actually the front. And so Madison Avenue over here, so the north and then the south are actually the front yards. And so there are 2 front yards. And so there is really no rear yard on this lot. And so then there are 2 side yards. And then this also being a corner has a corner side yard. So the front, again, is the north and the south. And then this would be the side, and then this is the side. And so then looking at the setbacks in the zoning code, there is a front yard modification setback for residential districts. And so the base zoning is 30 feet. When you look at the averaging for the modifications, you average properties that are within 300 feet of the property that are within the same district on the same side of the street in the same block. And so averaging it against the properties that are all to the west within 300 feet averages to around 62 feet. So the base zoning is 30 feet. The required zoning with the modifications is 62 feet. So doing that on the same on the southern front yard, again, 30 feet and then 85 feet when looking at the modification. And then also because it curves, then so does the setback. And so then looking at the corner side yard, a corner side yard is the is average of the base front yard. So they have 15 foot here and then 10 feet on the east side. So before I get too far, does the board understand all of that? Are there any questions? Okay, so to begin with, this was a fairly complicated situation. There is no placement of an accessory structure on this lot that would not have required some sort of zoning relief. The only way that they would have been able to do a project without zoning relief would have been able to try to fit in an attached garage up kind of in the back of the house, but it would still have to be 10 feet from the lot. So maybe a 1-car garage might have fit in there. However, there are existing steps and such behind the house, or having an attached garage in front of the house, or an attached garage on the side of this house. I would venture to say that anything on the architectural front of the house would not have met the guidelines and would not be approved. In my opinion, having a detached garage is the most architecturally sensitive thing to do for the building, as to not interfere or disrupt any historic materials on the house. So then looking at this property in regards to the zoning, again, while putting anything in front of the house, which was just, the applicants did discuss that with staff in wanting to place a garage up in the front. Staff did not feel that that was appropriate and that that would meet the historic guidelines. And again, would have also required zoning relief. In looking at the site as well, another difficulty on the site is that there is an 18-foot grade change from the southern side of the house down to the southernmost point of the house. So there is a decent elevation change. You can see that in the picture on that side as well. And then also looking at the house in regards to where things are in the house, the kitchen is also in the back corner of the house, which is part of the reason the choice to choose to put the garage up there from the applicants. So then looking at the standards of variances and special exceptions for under 1435, which is specific to historic districts, proposing the detached accessory structure garage is as I said, is the best approach and does not materially affect the historic building on the site and is contextually sensitive to the neighborhood, as historic carriage houses were detached from the principal buildings historically. The requested height of 18 feet is to help relate the building architecturally to the main building. So rather than having a flat roof, which would have potentially put them at 15 feet or slightly above 15 feet, they did choose to have a hipped roof, which is more architecturally appropriate and sensitive to the existing building. In regards to siding the building, the placement of the building in the north portion of the property avoids the south portion of the yard where there's an 18-foot grade change from the house to the southernmost point of the yard. It also helps maintain the existing tree coverage on the yard and avoids removing any mature trees. The additional parking outside the garage is acceptable given that the location of the garage. If they'd chosen to just do a 2-car garage and no carport, it would have met zoning. In regards to the special circumstances, I have already discussed that in length. And so this is in regards to standards of variances in section 1445, which would be applicable to all properties within the city of Cincinnati. One thing I do want to point out is that they are asking for a property right that many property owners in the same district or vicinity are requesting. So on this map, I do show multiple dots where the garage is either taller or larger and is either located in the side or front yard than what zoning would permit. So they are asking for flexibility in regards to the garage and in what a lot of other property owners have asked or have or enjoy. In regards to the parking, so as they do, so technically, as this is the front yard, and they are asking for more than what would be permitted to, or what more than would be required to just pull into the garage, they do have to receive a special exception for parking within their front yard. If the board does feel that the garage is appropriate or meets the standards of variance, staff does feel that the request is minimal and is compliant with the standards for special exceptions. So in regards to the certificate of appropriateness, as we don't have, as the guidelines don't have a specific section in regards to accessory structures, we do look at the additions section within the guidelines. And so staff is of the opinion that the detached garage does follow the guidelines. It uses similar materials, architectural language, and appropriate massing in relation to the historic building. The placement of it in that zoning front, the architectural side yard, is appropriate as it does not overwhelm the historic building. While the applicant is asking for additional paving, With it, they are going to be using a tumbled concrete paver in the architectural front and then change to asphalt as it gets to the driveway in order to provide more of a softer and more appropriate pavement material in the front of the house. So they are overall reducing the amount of paving compared to what is there now, because they are obviously removing the circular driveway as well as a curb cut. And so with that, staff does recommend the following. Approval of a locational variance per plans for 1812 Keys Crescent to allow the accessory structure to be placed in the front yard. A dimensional variance of 70 feet to allow the accessory structure to be 870 square feet. A 3-foot variance to allow the structure to be 18 feet tall, and a special exception for front yard parking. Staff also does recommend approval of a certificate of appropriateness for additions and changes to the property 1812 Keys Crescent for plans submitted by Kepis Architecture dated 7/19/21 with the following condition: that the building permit must be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire.
Thank you. And we have Chris Kepps speaking for the applicant. Is that correct? Mr. Kepps?
Yes, Chris Kepis. Yes, I'm
Kepis.
Chris Kepis, the project architect.
Like to get you sworn in.
Right.
Mr. Kepis, could you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right. What do you have to add that staff has not told us?
Well, I just wanted to, there are a couple of things. I meant to go over a brief history of our design process through this. Beth really covered all of that, the different locations we looked at until we got to the location that we settled on. We communicated with staff all the way through this. We are, and I wasn't clear what you were saying, Beth, but we are, and I think you may have said this, but we are reducing the amount of paved driveway surface because the entire back of the building has asphalt on it. We're taking 2 curb cuts to 1. And so I think therefore reducing the visibility of the motor court and driveway from off property. This is the most practical, accessible location on this lot outside of the rest of that. And this is a net property attribute, as Beth pointed out, that neighbors already enjoy in this area. But that's really all I have to add.
All right. Do we have questions from the board or for the applicant or staff at this point? All right, I have 2 more speakers. Martin Wilhelmi. How many names I can mangle today?
Hi, yes. No, you did well, thank you. I guess I have to get sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, what would you like to add?
We've considered all angles and aspects of this in design. The front, we agreed with staff, is not suitable since the historic visage and sculptural aspect doesn't warrant us placing a garage on the main facing front. We did not put this in the application, but building a pool is probably a 3-year wait list, and so it's not suitable for permitting. But that would have otherwise been in this application. You have the south-facing terrace and lawn yard lawn terrace below that. And so it's going to be a future thing to do a pool area behind that to the south. So to Chris's and Beth's point, 18 feet drop elevation and a 200-foot travel distance to the kitchen is completely impractical and wouldn't be suitable. So we strive to make this a beautiful building to match the historic grandeur of the Mansion District and make it a beautiful place for all.
Tim, I think you're muted.
Sorry, we also have Mr. Murray signed up, Mike Murray.
Yes, sir.
You solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, Mr. Murray, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And hi, Martin and Dagmar. So as I said at the pre-hearing, Mr. Chair, and greetings to the chair and to the board and to the staff, and I thank Beth for all her help on this. But we as the adjacent property owners are objecting to the plan presented to the board. And once I saw staff's recommendation, I think I'm even more militant on the subject because I disagree with some of the conclusions that have been drawn and ignoring the history of the district. This is not just, as the board knows, a district within 300 foot of the subject site. It's a historic district. And while we welcome the Wilhelmies to the neighborhood, and we have had very pleasant conversations back and forth, it's really awkward then to be objecting to their plans. We want them to have a garage. We object to the variance of the site location of the garage. Historically speaking, the original garage was on the south side or opposite side of the property. This talk about an 18-foot drop in topography on that side of the house is a red herring because they proposed a 28 by 50 foot terrace over there, which I don't think is going to be on an 18-foot slope. And a pool is not going to be on, this is just a matter of construction. And there's nothing that says the garage has to be at the extreme edge of this. That side of the house is the size of half a football field. There's more than adequate space to place a garage over there. And they have an excellent architect that could do that. There are motor court options. There are 20% of the houses on Keys Crescent have motor courts arrangements where the garage face is perpendicular to the front of the house. So when staff says that wouldn't be appropriate, I mean, it's already there. And that map that was presented that showed the dots around the neighborhood of garages that are in front yards and such is really misleading. I mean, some of those garages, not only have they been there for many decades before there was even a historical district, but also some of them are 150 feet away from the road. We've been through this before. If you look at in Beth, I don't know if you could pull up Exhibit B on my presentation, just as something for the board to observe, if that's possible.
I didn't have it in this presentation, so let me try and find it within my documents.
Okay, just a cages. I thought my presentation was in the board pack, sorry.
It was in the board packet. I don't always, this is a separate presentation.
Okay, if you can find, while I'm talking, a cages site of Madison Road. So for the board's information, if you were looking at a cages site map or an aerial view, there is a setback of all the buildings along Madison Road. This is one of the historic mansion districts of Cincinnati. And I think the board probably is aware of that. And this would be the first item. Okay, that only partially presents it, but it shows some of the immediately adjacent houses. But if you went on down the road between the business/church district of Woodburn all the way to O'Brienville, there are no structures in this place. And so that setback, the Chavezes came before this board a few years back and proposed to have a garage in that setback zone just about a block and a half away. And it was rejected by the board because the board at that time, and I don't know if any of you were serving, said, no, we're not going to have accessory buildings in this mansion district setback area. And so, and I regret, I wish the board could see my presentation, because this is really difficult to explain. But if you go Keys Crescent, as you may know, there it is. It is a crescent, you know, it touches Madison Road in two places. And I walked around the block today on my daily walk, and I just thought the other building at the other corner of the Keys Crescent, I thought, well, imagine if they wanted a garage in their front yard facing Madison Road. And imagine if both of those were agreed by the board. And then imagine if other people along that stretch, including our house, wanted to put an accessory building in front of our house. I mean, the precedent is to deny it. Across the street, a developer proposed to put structures along Madison Road in those large front yards. It was denied by this board. So historically speaking, the south side is where the property, the site should be for this. And I disagree with staff. The historical guidelines for East Walnut Hills, and I'm reading from my submission to the board, if any of you are able to find it and read it, it says that the siting should stay in line with neighboring buildings. New structures should be sited with setbacks similar to those of adjacent buildings. That's the guideline. This is not within the guidelines. It's inconceivable that you would grant an accessory building to any of the other properties. And I also point out that it's a distinct threat to the sight lines and visibility of our property. It's a 25-foot brick wall as we drive out of our property. Our house is a historic home of Nathan Baker, the son of the founder of Walnut Hills and East Walnut Hills. He is known to be one of the first photographers of the Valley of the Kings and the pyramids and the Greek temples and such. And our home is in a book called The 100 Great Homes of the Queen City, published by architectural historian Walter Langson on behalf of the Cincinnati Museum Center. So I've cited some other issues. I just think that the board, it will adversely affect our property. It will adversely affect this mansion district corridor of setbacks. And there are other options that their talented architect could present this board with that would have this structure somewhere other than 3 feet away from our front yard. So we want the Wilhelmies to have their garage, but we have been here 25 years and are among the pioneers that have helped resurrect this once depressed and crime-ridden neighborhood that went downhill in the 70s and 80s. And we just want our voice to be heard. We're the ones who've been protecting this neighborhood. And we urge the board to ask for a resubmission. Let's have a garage. It's a beautiful structure that's proposed, but just not at that site. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I make a statement?
You may.
I wasn't aware of any existing or pre-existing garage at any location on this property. Where?
It actually is now on the adjoining property. It was subdivided and sold as a house.
Okay. So again, the south property, the south yard, we wanted to preserve the park-like lawn with views down to Keys Crescent in the river, and it's simply an impractical location for a garage to use as an everyday garage, which other people in the neighborhood are able to do.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Can I say?
Hello?
Hello?
Sorry, what?
Yeah, I'd like to state something.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the 18 feet drop is not a red herring for anything. It's about lugging groceries 200 feet up a hill. And I believe Mr. Mike Murray is being very selfish today because he built the garage that is 36 feet from my library window. And our proposed garage is going to be 54 feet away from his study. So we're treating much less than he is with his garage. And he's got a pool on the south side. He could have put his garage on the south side. So we're just doing what he did himself, and he got permission from for the
No,
city.
It's in your backyard. It's not in a setback zone.
Well, 1899.
Excuse me. We've heard from both of you. Thank you. I'd like to give the board an opportunity to ask any questions, make any points they have. I know this property well. I lived on Keys Crescent Lane for a decade. I live in the neighborhood now. This has been this house is unique in my exposure. There is no backyard. There are arguably 3 front yards and 1 side yard. So I appreciate the difficulty that this presents. I do have a question for staff. How does staff look at a situation like this where somebody acquires a home, they know it's in a historic district, and then comes and asks to do something that is outside the guidelines?
Well, so I think that there's kind of 2 questions here. There's the historic guidelines, which would be the certificate of appropriateness, and then there's the zoning standards. And staff is of the opinion that it does substantially meet the historic district guidelines and the certificate of appropriateness standards. If the board does not feel that it does meet the historic district guidelines, then they can require an economic hardship argument per the zoning code. So then the second question is the zoning regulations and in regards to variances and special exceptions. And so as I stated in my presentation in the report, any placement for this accessory garage on the site would have required a zoning variance. And so, of course, a accessory structure is not necessarily allowed by right. However, the zoning code does allow for flexibility when you have difficult sites that don't meet where you are unable to meet the zoning code. And so in regards to an accessory structure and specifically a detached garage, this does provide a particularly difficult site. And so staff would look at the zoning code and look at the variance standards. And that is why there are variance standards in situations where you have a lot that is difficult to deal with in order that it would basically be impractical or you're unable to meet the zoning code for a specific situation. And so the zoning regulations for variances does not require an economic hardship standard. It does require that you meet 4 different things that you would need to prove that you meet one of those. So there's 2 within 1435, specifically for historic buildings. And then there are 2 within 1445. So between one of those 4 standards, if they're able to meet that, then staff would be able to be supportive of a request for a variance, and then ultimately it would be up to the board to decide. So Chairman Voss, does that answer your question?
No, not completely, but I appreciate, as I say, that this is a unique property, given how many front yards it has. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to move that we move to an executive session briefly. Or I move that we move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Zelasco,
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We will go into executive session. Everybody will be put in the waiting room. And as soon as we're finished, we'll come back on and let people know where we stand.